Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual. I'm your host, Doug Mackenzie, and on today's session, we're going to be discussing how automation and data are actually increasing the connection between the bank and their business clients in a rather human way. And joining me, I have two absolutely brilliant guests who are right at the heart of the topic. I have Irv Henderson from U.S Bank and Yasamin Karimi from Codat. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here today on the virtual arena. It's absolutely brilliant to see you guys. To kind of kick things off, I want to see if we can have you guys introduce yourselves actually. So Irv, could we get you to kick us off and give an introduction to yourself and your role over at U.S Bank, please?
Oh, thank you very much, Doug, and thank you for having us, and it's really a delight to be here. So I am the Chief Digital Officer for a small business at U.S Bank, and I've been at the bank almost 2 years now. I came to the bank through the acquisition of a software company I started, talech. And talech, as a business, was very focused on basically helping small business owners run their businesses better through software. So for us at U.S Bank, our journey is increasingly how do we get in front of small business owners through software to deliver the bank services. And before coming to the bank, I led and starting talech, I led mobile products at Yahoo. And so I've really spent a couple of decades thinking through customer experiences and software experiences for business owners.
Incredible. I'm really excited to hear your expertise and insights on the topic today. And Yasamin, also thank you so much for joining. Could you give our viewers a bit of background to yourself, Codat, and your role there, please?
Sure. Yeah, excellent to be here with you guys. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So as Doug said, my name's Yaz. I'm head of product at Codat. Started my career in payment infrastructure companies, then went on to MasterCard, where I distributed their services to large banks globally, and then moved into actually a fintech bank here in the UK called Starling and headed up product there. And then I started my own business, and that's where my love for Codat began. So I'll give a little bit of a brief intro into Codat. So Codat, as a name, stands for company data, and our primary focus is to make small businesses' financial lives easier by providing the banks they use with seamless integrations into the small business software systems. And essentially what that means in practice is it automates a lot of what they have to do with that bank. So for example, if they're applying for a loan, it means that because that bank is using Codat, that data stream becomes automatic and they don't have to do anything manual, like send Excels of financial statements through to the bank. So lots of what we do is about taking away the hard work that the small business owner has to engage in.
That's absolutely brilliant. Now, Yasamin, if I could stick with you then, we all knew that digitization in finance was coming. I feel like small businesses maybe were at the end of that journey, if that's fair to say. So did the pandemic maybe expose some of the legacy systems, and has it now actually created a dynamic industry ecosystem going forward?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So the pandemic definitely moved the primary delivery mechanism for financial products online. So also businesses moved online, and a change that was already rapidly progressing has now been propelled forward. So online was already a massive thing, and it's just been propelled by the fact that no shops were open. And especially with banking in particular, people didn't go into physical branches. So for banks that weren't used to primarily operating online, this was a challenge, but one that no doubt lots of banks met, because they had no choice, they had to, and specifically with lots of the loan schemes that were put in place to help small businesses, lots of banks, a lot of the large banks in particular, definitely delivered. So in regards to other areas that isn't specifically about small businesses and banking, one that's kind of close to my heart in terms of payments, the pandemic definitely led to huge growth in open banking here in the UK. So over 2.5 million people now use open banking to move, manage, and make the most of their money. A mighty 150% rise in the number of users since the outbreak of COVID-19. So that's absolutely massive. Yes. And a massive impact on small businesses and how they operate and how they take payments as well.
Yeah, Doug, if I could just jump in on that. I think that when I think about what the pandemic has done for small businesses and their relationship with banks, I think it's really whatever was our thesis before the pandemic in terms of digitization of small businesses. If that thesis was mass adoption in 10 years, that is now probably 3 years. 5 years. The windows have significantly compressed, and I think this is good news for small business owners. When I started talech, I was very motivated by this idea that you can significantly increase the efficiency of the way small businesses are ran by just giving them better technology, right? Putting better software in their hands so they can run their business better, get home earlier to their families, better understand what's happening in their businesses. And so for what we do at talech inside U.S. Bank, I mean, this has just been a significant acceleration of that thesis. That really this is a journey now, and Yas alluded to this, right? I mean, business owners are not walking into bank branches in the main. The banks have had to, and U.S. Bank in particular has pivoted to a significant digitization of those touch points, kind of online scheduling of meetings, even when you think about this, the technology we deliver, thinking through running your business better through software and using the software to contextually present the next opportunity. It could be working capital. It could be a new credit card for running your business. And so that whole kind of journey of bringing services to the customer is significantly accelerated. And it's really, really powerful. And what I like most about this, by the way, in the end, it's about getting small business owners comfortable about running their business. Most small business owners start a business out of a passion or interest. Running the business can be tough, and delivering software solutions and banking solutions in more easy to use ways really helps them.
Interesting. And Yas, if I could come to you then as well, following on from Irv was saying, there is just providing that contextual data, giving small, medium businesses the opportunity to run their business better by just giving them better visibility of data. Does that then on the other side mean that the quality and quantity of data that they provide has increased? And what's that going to mean for financial institutions?
Yeah, so on average, business owners use around 100 applications. That is, I mean, it sounds insane, but they use lots of different softwares to manage lots of different parts of their business and some of their workflows. So each of these applications, from their accounting software through to their online payment system, as examples, provides a unique and valuable view of their financial health, especially as a bank kind of looking into that data. So naturally, the more applications a business uses, the quantity of data will increase, but this can only be a good thing for the businesses and the banks they use. Instead of data being stored in a filing cabinet, being out of date kind of almost immediately after it's written, data is stored in software and is tracked, which in turn, it improves the quality, right? So that's why I say it can only be a good thing. And with this point in particular, with data being stored in software, there can be a lot of it, and understanding and interpreting it can be quite difficult, especially when you've got data from 100 applications if you're using a certain network. So that's why at Codat, one of the real things I'm trying to do in terms of developing our product is building, contextual and actionable insights at the end of the day that provide the likes of banks with out-of-the-box tools to be able to understand metrics on business performance, because ultimately that's what they want to be able to do, so that they can not only look after the business in terms of we care about you because you're a banking customer of ours, but also be able to offer more products to help those businesses.
Yeah, Doug, if I can build on that, I want to frame that. At the bank, we don't think necessarily in terms of 100 applications. That would be too many, right, for a small business owner. But I'd like to tighten that thesis a little bit, because we think there are about 7 applications that are really important. So there's the POS, the point of sale transaction, physical. There's e-commerce transactions that matter in terms of how those business owners capturing their revenues. Beyond that, you want to have integrated accounting so you can really automate that whole process. You want to be thoughtful about supply management, where your supplies are coming from. You want to be thoughtful about labor management, make sure that you really understand the ins and outs on labor management. And finally, you want to understand some form of CRM, how you're managing your customers. And those are 6 core applications, beyond which you can open up APIs to enable others. And then there are underlying that are, if you're thinking about expense management, you'll need a card issuing. And if you're thinking about, payment acceptance, you'll need some kind of merchant acquiring, some kind of processor in the background. But we think those 6 or so applications frame the problem set for most businesses. And then when you get beyond that, it becomes more thinking in terms of specific implementations or unique integrations that make a difference. It could be different. Maybe it's a vertical play something specific to, let's say, the construction industry, or pick your vertical, could be the restaurant business as well. So we think, by the time you get to 100 applications, it's really too many. And I think that's what Yas was alluding to, right? I mean, you really, certainly from a bank's perspective, we think in terms of what are the key applications that are triggering receivable data, what's incoming, and payable data, what's going. Because certainly on state side, I mean, there are 30 million individuals acting as merchants and about 7 million small and medium-sized businesses in America. And when we think about that problem set, increasingly they want to be able to have ease of use in the software. And then, when we think about that, we want to make sure that the software that we're using, certainly in talech to integrate others, is one that bring an easy to use interface for that customer. So again, I think the proliferation of application has certainly created a situation where there are many options, but in terms of the dominant applications that matter, it's actually quite a much smaller set.
Interesting. Now, Irv, if I could stick with you then, from the bank's perspective, what can these new data sets on these, for instance, just within these 6 applications that are the core of a business's needs, what can these new data sets actually do to enhance the bank's relationship with the client? We've talked about how the data is improving the client's ability to run their business, but let's move it back towards finance. How does that improve your guys' connection?
Yeah, no, this is massively important, right? So remember, most small businesses start out of a passion or interest, right? Once you get past that passion or interest, you have to run the business. And if you have to run the business, you're thinking about supplies, you're thinking about payroll, you're thinking about revenues and customers. So yeah, from a bank's perspective, I mean, we think in terms of core pain points. So a core pain point is cash flow. 50% of small businesses in the States sit on less than 27 days of cash. In most major markets in the US, 85-90% of those businesses are of less than $500,000 in revenues. Cash really, really matters. So from our perspective, being able to deliver delightful product experiences like accelerating your cash and figuring invoicing mechanism to delay your payouts, allow the business owner, without being a data scientist or a statistician or CPA, to manage their business better through data. So that's, for example, getting a dashboard and looking, when are your payables due? You really want to pay them when they're actually due and not before. Why? Because cash matters. And when you think about your receivables, if you have an invoice out there, or if you think about merchant acquiring, you've accepted payments and you want to be able to draw down on those payments earlier, we want to be able to make those tools available from a software perspective, because they allow the business owner to, again, accelerate cash into their bank account and decelerate cash leaving their bank account. So that's like first principles, right? At the very core of it is managing your cash flow as a small business owner. And it goes without saying, these are individuals that are on the tail, right? I mean, most of us in the audience will have a family member, some relative, friend, somebody down the street that owns a business. It turns out the business of running a business is actually non-trivial, right? So whatever we can do from a bank's perspective to bring the bank services into that customer journey from and integrating into software is really powerful, and creates an environment for them where they really feel helped, that they're getting some help from the bank.
Yeah. And Yas, can I also come to you and see from that kind of software perspective, what are your insights into what a customer's relationship with a bank can be enhanced by these new technologies?
Yeah, so I think a really key point about the integration study that we provide and the software systems that the businesses use is access to real-time data. So with access to real-time data, it gives the banks a much better understanding of their business customers, and that has a clear knock-on effect to the standard of service a bank is able to offer, because they have that understanding, right? So as an example, instead of being reactive to a small business because a small business has made a specific request, a bank could proactively assess a business's data to provide them with a loan or a cheaper rate on a credit card. And that changes the dynamic of the bank to SME relationship slightly, and it also positively impacts the bank's ability to garner a greater share of the SME's wallet, essentially. It means the SME is, having to manage fewer application relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be just huge going forward. But I mean, it can be, realistically, I imagine it can be explored in the whole kind of variables of business banking all the way up to corporates. So Irv, could I ask, from SMBs all the way up to corporates, how can these new data insights actually improve the customer's banking experience going forward? What, Yas was bringing up stuff, for instance, offering up different kind of products. What are you seeing from your side?
Yeah, no, Yaz is spot on, right? I mean, likely brought into focus as a result of the pandemic and the acceleration we see from a digitization perspective and the activities we have going. But one of the core theses we're going through is, how do we bring the bank to the customer? Yaz made a comment at the very top, and which is true, right? Business owners don't want to increasingly walk into a bank branch. They want the convenience of being able to do whatever is the banking business they're doing from any time, at any time, anywhere. So kind of time shifted engagement with the bank is, why do I need to wait for the bank to open? That's insane. So this notion of using technology to bring the bank services to the customer is really obviously powerfully convenient. And if you bring it with rich data that allows the customer to take smart actions, then that's incredibly sticky from a bank's perspective. So this is more than just making, and Yaz alluded to it, right? Real-time access to information. Now, obviously with the talech data, everything is real-time. You log into your dashboard and all your account, whatever you receive by way of payments, whatever you have by way of paying out, whatever transactions, it's all in real time. And that is powerful. Again, you don't have to be, as a business owner, a CPA to understand what's happening. A core part of this is not only having access to the data, but being able to present the data in a simple way that the business owners can understand. And then beyond that, being able to bring insights into the data, right? Making it powerful. So we're beginning to think through things like elastic lending. What is elastic lending, right? These are concepts we're beginning to toy with. Back to building on real-time data. Elastic lending could be, we lend you a certain dollar amount at the beginning of the year and a different dollar amount in the middle of the year because we know your business is cyclical. Makes every sense in the world, but that's the future. It's a future of using data insights. First of all, you have to be able to aggregate the data, but using the aggregated data to pull powerful insights to help the business owner run their business better. Again, a core thesis for us is, when we pull the thread all the way through, it's kind of, we're trying to solve for, how do we make the business owner go home earlier, right? Have more cash to manage, by being smart in the way that we deliver information to them. By the way, this is an epic journey. When I think about this disruption, while COVID has accelerated the implementation of more technology and digitization, we're likely on a 15-year disruption here, right? Because the underlying plumbing, and Yaz is alluding to this, right? You have a proliferation of not only new software capabilities that are coming into play, you're sitting on legacy platforms often, whether it's the payments infrastructure, on merchant acquiring, or on card issuing. So it's quite a journey ahead.
I can imagine it is. And, I think it goes beyond just getting people home quicker. It's probably, it's not just taking hours off their day. It's probably adding years onto their lives. It's really quite a human issue behind this very kind of artificial intelligence, this very data-centric way of revolution, effectively. Now, we've kind of talked about the customers providing huge amounts more data to financial institutions and how that's a positive thing. But I mean, even just about 5 years ago, we were still having large institutions not knowing where elements of their data, they couldn't pull it all together, they couldn't consolidate it. Especially for small, medium businesses all the way up to corporates, that's a huge amount of data. So yes, when we're looking at the large-scale institutions that maybe have their data set in silos, how does this massive influx in data, does that actually present a problem?
Yeah, so I heard an interesting point around some large banks and the fact that, you just alluded to it, the fact that they operate very in a siloed manner. So a small business customer who's going to that bank may be trying to acquire a specific service from that bank and chooses to share data, not even counting the fact that that bank may have integrations or not. So let's just say they're doing it manually, and then they get a service from another side of the bank, and they have to again apply those same documents when to the business, they just see the bank as that, one relationship. Why are they having to do that in multiple areas? It's a simple problem that I think lots of us are aware of, but actually that massively impacts the user experience of the small business. So in terms of the data actually presenting a problem, because there's lots of it, I actually think it's the opposite. There undoubtedly needs to be a way of managing that data and channeling it to the right places. But banks should see the influx of real-time data as an opportunity to be the central point of connectivity to their business customers. If I've connected all of my applications to a bank as a business owner, I'm much more likely to stick with that bank. To an extent, this is a bit of a hypothesis, but it massively impacts user experience. So to an extent, it's common sense.
Yeah.
And I'm much more likely to stick with that bank because it is, less overhead for one, and for two, I'm getting a personalized service with exceptional UX. So why would I go elsewhere? So that's really how I think about it.
Yeah. Oh yes, and I think that's the way we're thinking about it. I think that's spot on. So a couple of comments on that. So the history of banking, right, in terms of banking services are quite discrete, right? Whether it's kind of, if you're thinking about lending or deposits or card issuing or merchant acquiring for card acceptance in the merchant, those are discrete businesses in the history and the journey of how those businesses were built. And you're right, where banks are in the main is a journey transitioning from thinking about the instance of that customer in those discrete moments, all the way, by the way, to wealth management, right? Thinking about the journey of those customers in discrete moment, and then taking the next critical step, which is having one KYC against that customer that is agnostic. There is no reason why today, given the data that resides in banks in general, that we should not be able to repurpose, reuse data that's already been collected for pick your journey. So the journey could be, you signed up, you started a business and signed up for merchant acquiring, so for card issuing. That data could then be used for issuing, reused for issuing a card if you want a business card, right? To your point, those experiences should be seamless. That's the journey of most banks, by the way. That's where they're going, right? And so to the original question then, Doug, all banks have massive data lakes. And Yas has alluded to it. These data lakes often don't talk to each other. But the journey for banks, again, to be relevant and sticky over time as banks evolve to this place where they're taking banking in a digital way to the customer, a prerequisite to deliver that in a seamless experience is that you're building interfaces that actually connect the customer experience. So that Doug actually was, he has a pre-existing relationship, maybe around car, he has a business card, and Doug is now looking at potentially taking out a working capital for his business. That's going to come. Banks are at various stages in thinking about this problem. And for Codat, that's an opportunity. Your business should be around all of that, right? You help to accelerate this migration to increasing digitization and having one view of the customer. Just one last comment on this, because I think Yas is spot on. There has to be, there's a core thesis in U.S. Bank around this, that in the end, getting to that one view of the customer and delivering customer experiences that build on and are contextual, just in time, are really important for stickiness. The presentation of a working capital in the context of using the bank software to run your business is perfectly natural. Somebody calling you out of the blue to ask you if you want to borrow, take out a working capital without understanding your business is not. The former is digital, the latter is analog. And that transition is a journey that, banks are at varying degrees on, but it is well understood that for customer retention going forward, it's going to be very important that you get to that one view and deliver software services that are helpful to customers.
Yeah. So Irv, just to follow on then, can I also ask how critical you think automation will be going forward to a bank? Do you think that the banks that don't actually fully automate might actually go the way of the dinosaur?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So we've talked about kind of digitization, and related to that is, what you're saying is automation, I think, in terms of delivering digital experiences to the customer that use data insight to power those journeys, right? So the idea of engaging Doug contextually and introducing you to more and more services. We actually believe that a differentiated way of doing this is to do the human plus digital, which you alluded to, right? When you think about the history of banks, banks were set up in local neighborhoods where you'd walk in and the banker would know who you're related to and know your family history and name and all, that. We are actually there from a digital perspective. There's no reason why we could not deliver that in an even more powerful way for the journey of that kind of that virtual walk into the bank where we actually know who you are. So we think this combination of digital and human is actually differentiated and powerful in the way that we treat you when you walk in, and walking in a virtual way, by the way, when you are engaging with the bank. And we see that as a powerful aspect of what we do in the future. So the foundational work, we've talked about kind of where we are from a data perspective, what needs to happen from a data perspective in terms of the aggregation of data, what needs to happen from a data insights perspective, and then what needs to happen from a customer touch point, right? It's presentation of insights. There's a parallel journey on the Salesforce transformation, reimagination of the way that the touch point, the human touch point is into that customer to actually become a trusted advisor. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you think about that journey, if you are in your, I've sold you a mortgage or I've sold you a working capital, you're an expert in that domain. But the future of banking from a human perspective is that the people who are interfacing into that business owner are actually multidisciplinary and or are in close contact with virtual teams, which are things that we're experimenting with now, right? The touch point to Doug may be you start in a conversation around working capital, but your real business needs are more comprehensive. Then the question from a bank's perspective is how do we use our digital knowledge of you to then present you with a human conversation that is more consultative? And we think that's a powerful differentiated journey.
Yeah, and hearing that changing role of a bank that's coming from this journey, it's not just changing a product offering, it's changing the whole kind of purpose of a bank to become that teller that maybe a local branch used to have. As you mentioned, knowing their family, knowing the kind of financial relationship and being able to act on that and offer products as a result. It's funny that now the digital and the artificial intelligence is actually going to be able to offer one further. And Yaz, I'd also be really interested to hear your perspective on automation in the financial industry as well.
Yeah, so obviously automation as a general concept is hugely broad and you can apply it to many areas, especially when you think about how a business interacts with their bank. But I personally think about the fact that businesses don't want to be spending their time doing lots of the cumbersome tasks that they're forced to do because they use various applications and because they want to operate their business correctly. And one of the things that we've looked at in terms of and been successful in terms of use cases is synchronizing data into accounting software. Because businesses spend hours upon hours, they employ people, if they're large enough, to purely input numbers into a system, which in this day and age just feels like, I don't know, it's a foreign concept, especially with what we're building at Codat. We just feel like fundamentally that should not need to happen. So that's essentially one of our biggest missions, right, is to make sure that business owner doesn't have to worry about keying in those numbers. Codat is the system and that is running all of that stuff and making sure that all your systems are talking to each other and it's automated. In terms of like a near-term example, so at Codat, one thing we've done since the pandemic was, and we're very particularly proud of, is we played quite a big role in terms of getting funding to SMEs. So we worked with a very large UK bank to basically build and power their entire loan application for COVID-related small business loans. So what that would have looked like for businesses before is having to manually share all that data, and banks, to be honest, found it very hard to cope with even the influx of data if they were able to connect to the accounting software. So imagine having to do that with documents. So we were very proud of that, and it essentially resulted in a 90% reduction in time to capital for businesses, which we like to think played a massive part in helping with specifically the UK economy in this case, and saved lots of businesses hopefully. So that automation in its most simple concept would just be like, yes, I can apply it to a loan, and in a dire situation I can get that loan from my bank because they have a connection to my software. That we can't underestimate how important that is, but actually a bank is in a powerful position to be able to apply that to every other use case, whether it be the 7 applications that Irv mentioned, the payment system I use and having that talk to my accounting software. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is hugely important. And actually businesses who are already digital and and just understand the concept of why it's important. They just expect it out of the box, and banks should be focusing on making sure that that's happening.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I guess businesses, obviously, as you mentioned, some are already digital native, ready to go. What will automation mean for relationship managers, Yaz, going forward, that are now having to interact with businesses that are just ready? They're like, why aren't you cloud native? Why aren't you sending me these notifications? I don't have time for this. Are we going to see automation change the role of the relationship manager going forward?
So I believe yes, but hugely positively. So relationship managers are the most important people to the SMBs when it comes to their banking experiences. Collecting data from SMBs to properly serve them can take mass amounts of time though, right? Because it's hugely manual. There's lots of stuff I need to understand about this business to properly serve them. And a large element of that is what Irv alluded to earlier, was around, in the old days, you would have that relationship with that business, know who their family was, their name, etc., etc. And obviously we have a massive opportunity to digitize that experience. But it's still really important for a business owner, no matter how digitized all their systems are and how much they talk to each other, to have someone that they can call, right? People really care about that because you're dealing with such a sensitive part of their life, like all of their financials, how they make their money. So I think the thing that relationship managers will benefit from is the fact that acquiring that data, takes a lot of time. Ongoing monitoring of those SMBs also takes a lot of time. Understanding and interpreting the mass amounts of data that we just talked about takes a lot of time. And then actioning that data, again, it has to be very, very specific and correct, right? Because you have to be able to understand the business to make the right action or make the right call and stuff. So they're all massive tasks, the relationship manager, that with connections to software systems becomes so much easier to tackle, so that the RM can then focus on carrying out those tasks without having to have multiple email chains with the SMB when they're being, sent outdated financials. So I think to go back around again, it can only be a good thing, and it really does need to be embraced by these relationship managers.
Yeah, no, if I can build on what Yaz is saying, I totally agree. I mean, I think business owners want an advisor who knows their name, who understands their business. That's the history of banking, right? And I think I'll give you a digital experience that we're, working with right now post-pandemic, and I've alluded to this in terms of virtual teams. So what we are doing in the bank today in a small way, and we'll expand it, is that first touch point is often somebody but that person has access, virtual access. They could be anywhere in the country, in the States, right? Specialized across multiple products, can be easily brought in to a conversation with a customer, all digital, by the way. So it may start the journey with, we're gonna do a video conference together. We're doing this today. And we start a consultative journey around how can we be helpful? And then in that journey, we discover that you're actually probably looking at working capital or mortgage, or you may be looking at a business card or maybe underwriting. And we have the experts that we can bring in real time in this conversation as we're discussing right now. And those experts can be anywhere in the country. But that's a powerful example that builds, I think, on what Yaz is saying, right? The starting point on that journey is somebody who actually knows you and has some history about you. But the arc of that conversation, that consultative relationship becomes all the experts that could be brought. In a pre-COVID world, it would have been a whole journey around, well, that person is not available. And what about next week, Tuesday, or the week after? That's nonsense, right? I mean, clearly with this digital context, we can bring all of the bank to the customer in a seamlessly integrated way, starting from a place that is already an existing relationship. So just to build on Yaz's point, relationship managers really matter in this world of digital plus human, somebody who knows your name and understands your context. It actually is really important for trust.
Yeah, and I think that is the core of what a bank offers, is that trust, and to be able to, as you said, to offer that human plus artificial intelligence or plus automation is going to be so critical going forward. But guys, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for your insights into something that is really quite a human issue when it comes to finance. And it's really exciting hearing all the work that Codat and US Bank have been doing in this sector. So once again, thank you so much. And also to you, our viewers, for watching, thank you. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you there in the comments. So once again, guys, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves too, and I'll see you again soon. Ciao.